Everything you think you know about gendered clothing is about to get turned completely on its head. So let's go back in time. Picture a Victorian nursery, but forget all the pink and blue stuff you're imagining. What you'd actually see is just a sea of simple, practical white dresses. And these dresses, they were for everybody. All the young kids, boys and girls alike. This wasn't some kind of fashion statement. For hundreds of years, it was just plain common sense. And this whole thing wasn't about style, it was about pure logic. I mean, think about it. White fabric, you could boil it and bleach it clean, which was a huge deal for hygiene back then. The loose design meant the same clothes would fit as a kid grew, saving a ton of money. And maybe most important of all, a dress could be handed down from an older sister to her baby brother, no problem. It was cheap, it was clean, and it was simple. So you might be wondering, when did a boy stop wearing dresses and start looking like a boy? Well, that moment was marked by a really special milestone. It was called the breeching ceremony. Right around age 7, a boy would finally trade in his dress for his very first pair of trousers, or breeches. And it was a huge celebration. It was like a rite of passage, moving from that shared world of early childhood into boyhood. And this wasn't some forgotten custom only a few people followed. Get this. This is a young Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1884, a future president of the United States, looking perfectly normal for the time in his dress and feathered hat. And you know what? Back then, absolutely no one would have batted an eye. This was just how you dressed kids. But the dresses, that's only half the story. Because when society did eventually start assigning colors to babies, they got it completely backwards from what we all assume today. You might want to sit down for this one. The original rule was pink for boys and blue for girls. The thinking was that pink, being a lighter shade of red, a powerful, warlike color, was stronger and more decisive, perfect for a boy. Blue, on the other hand, was seen as daintier, more delicate, and it was associated with the Virgin Mary, so it was considered prettier for a girl. And look, this isn't just some theory we cooked up. We have the receipts. This is from a 1918 trade publication called Earnshaw's Infants Department, and it spells it right out. The generally accepted rule is pink for boys. Can you even imagine walking into a baby store and seeing that today? So, if pink was for boys and blue was for girls, what on earth happened? Well, this brings us to a really fascinating historical puzzle. The great color flip of the 20th century. So how did we get from a world where FDR wore dresses and baby boys were pink to our super color-coded world of today? Well, the answer has less to do with tradition and a lot more to do with money. You see, the main driver behind this massive cultural shift was the rise of modern marketing and the huge financial incentive to just split the kids' market right down the middle. It all comes down to this really clever business strategy called market segmentation. I mean, think about it. That practical white dress could be handed down from a daughter to a son. Easy. But what if you convince parents that boys must wear blue and girls must wear pink? All of a sudden, those hand-me-downs are useless. You've just forced families to buy a whole new set of clothes, toys, everything. You've literally doubled your market overnight. Here's the playbook. It's pretty simple. First, you invent the new color code, and you push it hard. Then you start linking these colors to a kid's proper gender identity, which creates a lot of social pressure. This move totally blocks that hand-me-down path, and the result? Ka-ching, a massive surge in sales. It was a brilliant and honestly an incredibly effective business strategy. Now, while marketing was definitely the biggest driver, it wasn't the only thing going on. The shift really happened gradually through the 40s and 50s. It got a push from post-war culture, which was really big on traditional gender roles, and also from manufacturers who just wanted to standardize things. But make no mistake, that commercial incentive was the engine pushing this whole train forward. What's truly wild to me is not just that this change happened, but how quickly and completely we erased the memory of what came before. An entire cultural norm just, poof, vanished in a couple of generations. And here's how fast it can happen. Your great-grandfather, he wore a dress and remembers it. Your grandfather, he saw the photos of his dad in a dress. Your parents, they might have vaguely heard a story about it once. And for us, today, the whole idea is a complete shock. That's how fast cultural memory can just dissolve when a new, heavily marketed idea takes over. I mean, the contrast is just staggering. The nursery back in 1900 was this space of calm, gender-neutral, practical stuff. Now, fast forward to today, And thanks to things like the gender reveal party, that whole pink and blue marketing machine often starts revving its engines before a child is even born. And to really understand just how arbitrary our Western rules are, we kind of need to zoom out and take a look at the rest of the world. Because out there, the idea that trousers are for men and dresses are for women, it just doesn't hold up. You've got Scottish men in kilts, men in Saudi Arabia wearing a thobe, a man in South Asia wearing a lungi. Now, we might look at those and call them a skirt or a dress, but in their cultures, they're simply menswear. It just goes to show that our Western rules are just that, our rules. They are not universal truths. So what does this all mean? What's the takeaway? It means the gender norms we just take for granted, especially with colors and clothes, they aren't rooted in some deep biological truth. They're actually pretty recent, they're flexible, and more often than not, they were just really profitable inventions. When you strip away all the marketing and all the cultural conditioning from the last 100 years, you're left with a very simple fact. Clothing is just fabric. We're the ones who give it all the meaning. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final question, doesn't it? If something that we think of as so fundamental, like the right color for boys and girls, could completely reverse itself in just a few decades, what other things that we accept as solid, unchangeable facts about our world are actually just temporary trends, just waiting for the next big flip?